what your choices have been, and what karmic timelines and contracts you have journeyed. The light is calling for the reunification of all aspects of life in this realm now. It is calling for the cleansing of all polarities. It is calling for the rising of all sacred heart centers now. All are being summoned home to the greater light now.
Hi, and welcome everyone to Whole Soul Mastery and Whole Soul School and Foundation's joint podcast today. I'm Marie Moeller, and I'm an author, an intuitive, and a messenger of empowering people in these ascension times, in these epic times of change and shifts in consciousness on the planet. And I want to welcome Ameera Atlantis back to this conversation today. Thank you, Ameera, for joining me.
So good to be back with you, Marie.
It's so good to be back together. And for those not familiar, Ameera has a YouTube channel. It's Ameera Atlantis Healer. And you have a website that's ameeraatlantis.com. And I wanted to just reintroduce you because some people will have listened to our other podcasts. We've talked about Merlantis. We talked about Maui. We've talked about construction and reconstruction and being of service and navigating interdimensional stress. That was a big topic. But I want to draw attention to you for a moment that you are a multidimensional teacher. You have courses. You have many wonderful offerings through your website. You have another class, a course coming up, I think, on maybe the 17th coming up.
I do. Yes, March 17th.
March 17th.
Atlantis, Sacred Geometry, and Metatron's Cube.
I mean, just the topics, like for someone like me who knows there's a future pull, there's something pulling us forward. We're going to be talking about that future timelines today. But Ameera is one of those people that is like a portal yourself. You're inviting people to, step up and through what is really like the next step, the next level of our consciousness. And you have that course that you're going to be offering within the next week. But you're a healer. You're a mer person, you're a past life regression therapist, which is huge, and you're a seeder of the new Earth Atlantis. And you also like share about and sell Andara crystals through your website, which is another higher frequencied resource we can talk about. So today, though, we're going to be talking about a really important topic, because I think we're all feeling the powerful energies that are pouring through the ethers and into our lives, like on a daily basis. A lot of us are feeling it in many different ways, whether they're triggers or squeezes, some moments of celebration and good vibes of what's coming, but also this, I think humanity is feeling it. There's maybe like a restlessness. We sense that an epic amount of change is happening. And so we wanted to talk today about how sometimes humanity has a tendency to cling to structures and organizations and programs and belief systems that are familiar to us, even though we know they're not serving us, right? Or our highest good, and certainly not the collective good. So we tend to cling to them because they're familiar and they've been conditioned into us for centuries, for lifetimes upon lifetimes, right? So before we dive into that, I wanted to kind of set the stage for this topic. I've shared this in a podcast before. There's a little parable. It's called Autobiography in 5 Short Chapters. And it's worth sharing again because it really speaks to what we're going to be talking about, how we cling to the old ways. So let me just read this. And I don't think you've heard this before. So Autobiography in 5 Short Chapters, okay? Number 1, I walk down the street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I'm lost. I'm helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find my way out. Number 2, I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I still don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place. It isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Number 3, I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it there. I still fall in. It's habit. It's my fault. I know where I am, but I get out immediately. Number 4, I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Number 5, I walk down a different street, right? And I think while we're talking about ways that people cling to things, I think maybe we want to start there, Ameera, as we all know we are humans and the human parts of ourselves are creatures of habit.
Right.
So if we do tend to cling to the familiar and the things that we know, even if we sense that they're kind of crumbling or the foundations upon which these structures were built, whatever they are, our own belief systems, even if they're in question or they're being shaken a little bit, people will sometimes cling tighter because it's what they know. Maybe you wanted to share some thoughts just about the aspect of clinging first before we get to the good stuff of like, portaling into new timelines and new visions.
Yes. Well, it all goes back to survival and humans having to be in survival mode, really for most of our existence, our physical safety, right? Um,
Mm.
where we live, where we eat, having food, having resources. Humans are not native to this planet. And the reason I know humans are not native to this planet is if you think about all the other creatures who live here, who have adapted over time and evolved over time so they could survive here, right? The evolution of all these different species who have had to, grow fur or grow wings or grow legs or whatever they had to do to continue. Humans were very different than the other creatures of this planet. We have to have special houses, special clothes. We have to be careful of our diet in order to exist here. There is no other species here that has to have special accommodations
Wow.
to be able to live here. We couldn't live here if we didn't have proper shelter. We don't grow fur, which means we've got to have clothes of some sort. We have to be careful what we put in our bodies because there's a lot of things that will kill us or make us sick if we eat them or if we don't eat them properly. So this is how I really know that humans were star seeds. We came from somewhere else to inhabit this place, and essentially we've had to live the same way since the beginning of existence, right? So when you think about, survival and our survival tendencies and how hard, eons before us, generations, lifetimes before us have had to fight so hard just to exist here, it's really in our DNA. It's really in our ancestry. It's in our genetic makeup. It's in our chakras. It's in that, a root chakra and that sacral chakra, and all those lower chakra energies is all the, the fear and the fight and the struggle and everything that our ancestors have had to take on just to be here, even though our existence here is a lot more pleasant than it was even 50 years ago, 100 years ago. Our lives are so much easier, but yet we still have this really innate, deep seated fear of letting go of the familiar or clinging to the idea that we might have to be uncomfortable or we might not live, right? So we have this whole evolution happening right now, this whole, awakening and ascension process. And we have all these new technologies and things that make our lives so much more comfortable. And also simultaneously, we have all these different systems and programs that really are not only do they not serve us, but they're flat out corrupt. They're flat out something that has been put in place to give us the illusion of security. And I think religious programming is a good example of that. I think medical programming, medical corporations are a good example of that. And our financial system is probably one of the most important structures, one of the important programs that have been inserted into us, how we do commerce with each other, how we, buy and sell, how we obtain goods, what we do to enable to create abundance and prosperity in our life, or at least give us the idea or the illusion that that's what we're doing. So that was a long, that was a long little dissertation, but that's my wrap up of, why humanity has a propensity to cling.
Hmm. Wow. I mean, I don't often, when we're aware of the corruption, many of us listening to a podcast like this would know that something's not quite right in our world. Awake, they're
Something's
pretty
not
awake
quite
to that.
right.
Something's not
Yes,
quite right. But I hadn't taken it back to the beginning in a way of when humans even arrived here. We're not really from here. And no wonder our root chakras are so overstimulated, exhausted, because it's oriented towards survival. It would be
right.
like if somehow, I mean, it's depicted in so many shows where like portals open and people fall through a portal into a different dimension, and they have to get oriented quickly. They have to
Right.
orient to their surroundings wherever they fell into and whatever that dimension is. So that we can call that time traveling if you want, right? Or, dimensional traveling. But I hadn't really thought about that we have had to orient to survive in this realm. And then we never get to thriving when we're stuck in the patterning that I have to survive, right? That it just plays
Hmm.
out over and over. And if you find a safe space, if you found a place, if you and your family, like centuries ago, and it's in your DNA, it's in your karmic history, that you found that you're safer by the sea, or you're safer, in the middle of a country, on the plains or something. People tend to cling to the things that they know. And it's not just what they know this lifetime. We cling to things that are familiar from other lifetimes, right?
Right.
So the old programs are running us. And as you brought up, how has this matrix, how has this version of Earth, this timeline controlled the masses for so long? It's literally been through the power of the word, the usurping of language, and the money systems. If you
Yes.
control the language and you control the money systems, you control the life forms there. And,
Yes.
we're talking big picture about what we cling to, but people can cling to a job that has been making them sick for a
Right.
long time, right?
Or relationship that's making them sick.
Right. There's so many things to cling to. But you bring up really good points that there's something almost, that's how the matrix wants it anyway. It wants you hardwired to feel like you're just barely surviving. Because if we stay in that overstimulated, like the lower three chakras, we don't ever really take a breath to portal into what if all that is an illusion,
Right.
really, at some level? And what if that illusion is beginning to crumble, which we can see. Like we can see in the systems of our world, the banking industry is shaking. It is shaking. I mean, not everybody's seeing this and hearing this because the word has been usurped. So the word's not getting out to everybody. But I think
Hmm.
you and I can at least spotlight. I wanted to say something that I found fascinating that I learned probably back in 2015, that currencies have expiration dates. They don't teach us
Yeah.
about money in school. I think that's a little bit on
Right.
purpose, right? And they don't teach us about thinking bigger about currencies and exchanges and governments and countries and all of that. But I found it fascinating to hear that currencies, fiat currency, paper money, has an expiration date. They, on average, live about 40 years. 40 years. And that would make our US dollar somewhere in the vicinity of about 110 years old, like at least two times its
Way past the expiration date.
way, way past. And there's a lot of good people in podcasts that if we just look into the financial system, where some people are clinging to their dollar or clinging to the ways that they've made money. I know I've heard my own
Hmm.
family members, well, your grandfather did it this way, and I'm doing it this way, and you will do it this way. And inside, there's been this little, this still small voice of my spirit saying, no, I'm going to do it differently, right? But it's generational. And there's this generational
Yeah.
thing that goes on. So if the dollar is over 100 years old anyway, and it's a couple times past its expiration date, how people can actually see that when it was created, a dollar was worth 100 pennies. It was worth a dollar, right?
Right.
And I think $1 may have even equaled an ounce of silver. And
Yeah, and
but
it was all backed by gold. You know, in 1948, after the war, all the assets went backed by precious metals. It was actually worth the money.
right, it was actually worth the money it was printed on. And you should be able to go into a bank and you could exchange it for the precious metals that were backing it, right?
Right.
And then along came
Yep.
a couple few decades later, I know at least in 1971, Nixon disconnected us from the gold standard again, right? I was born
Right.
in August of 71, and about 2 weeks later is when that happened.
Right. And you know, you and I both have been studying the Bretton Woods 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
Bretton Woods 1 was us going on the gold standard. Bretton Woods 3 is coming because when Nixon took us off the gold standard, it was because we couldn't pay our debts in the gold as we promised to these other countries. And so they were giving us their goods and services. They were giving us hard commodities. And when they came back with their little pieces of paper with ink on them that they had been stockpiling and said, we want our gold at $35 an ounce or whatever it was promised to them, we flat out didn't have it. So Nixon started giving them our land instead. Like the Conservation Acts and the EPA were really about us paying a debt to other countries. It wasn't about conserving the land. And because we don't get those kind of educations in school, you know, school doesn't teach us about these kinds of things. We don't understand really the history of money and the history of you know, the history of the dollar. And so now we have this, what is termed fiat currency, that everybody loves cash. Cash is king, cash is great. And there's this big push to hang on to cash-based programs when we're also aware that our cash isn't worth anything. So it's this kind of big catch-22 of, you know, we want to hang on to the idea of cash, but actually we know it's not really worth anything, but there's nothing else in place that is better or bring us to the next evolution of how we are trading for commodities. So, you know, humanity is really in this kind of like position right now of we all want change. Everybody says we want change. We want change, but nobody wants anything to change.
Right.
And part of that is a lack of understanding. So, I mean, I would encourage anybody listening to this to study Bretton Woods 1, 2, and 3, to study something called Basel 3. And, you know, we can talk about the new banking implementation, the loan banking that went in, I'm not saying it right, on March 11th, which was called
The Bank Term Funding Program.
Term Funding Program has ended.
It has
It's
ended.
over. No more bank bailouts, Marie.
Right.
So
And
looking
banks are in
at
the
the bigger
business of loaning money,
picture,
and now they're not going to be
yeah,
able to loan money.
they're not going to be able to loan money. And that's how banks make their money. So it's going to be really interesting this next year and ongoing to see how some of these, you know, big banks, how these organizations handle their finances, and if they can actually, you know, stay in business. It's going to be very, very interesting to see what kind of the ripple effect or the fallout happens because of that program ending. And, you know, I personally think it's a very good thing. I am really not afraid to see or to not have, you know, the tax dollars be going to propping up these banks anymore, or the Federal Reserve not propping up these banks that are really doing us dirty anyway. But along with that is going to be change. And, you know, people really need to get ready for and not only get ready, but have a trust in new systems coming into place, new systems of commerce coming in that are supposed to be based on what? Equality, unity, wealth for all, humanitarianism. Get ready for something to come in, even if you can't see it now, that's going to offer something that is better in alignment for the new Earth timelines.
And I believe there's something in many of our consciousnesses that even if people don't know what that new system is, or they don't know a lot of information about it, if you're feeling an inkling, like there's people praying, there's people intending, there's people desiring, we know there's something else that's meant to come in. And
Yeah.
we're calling it forward. We are pioneers, like summoning in this new experience that's going to be far better. And we think about whether it's biblical stories where people had to like literally leave their homes, right? And migrate. You've got the whole
Hmm.
Moses story and they went through the Red Sea, but they had to choose to leave. I always find that story fascinating. And from some people that I've listened to, like only 1/5 of the Israelites chose to go. The rest
Yeah,
stayed in captivity, right?
right.
And didn't want to face all the unknowns, including, what Pharaoh might do. He changed his mind, which he did, turn and chase them.
Yep.
But there are there are always pioneers of people summoning in the new systems. And the beautiful thing is, I think there are many collectives of people who've gotten the download or gotten the messages. We're transcending those lower three chakras that are, for a lot of people, have been locked in fear and surviving, and are looking past that, have done some of the
Yeah,
spiritual work, have gone on the journey to heal and transcend the fears of, all the things that are connected to the lower three chakras, and have access to that creative power. The power
right.
in your root and sacral and solar plexus chakras, and that creative power. And you and I are
They can empower you to move forward also. They're our foundation.
correct. And they have access, if we'll allow it, to other dimensions of knowings, other visions of greatness and amazing things, which we'll talk about maybe a little bit towards the end. But as we talk about just being aware of, what are we still clinging to? Where are we still clinging to things that we think are keeping safe, like paying my taxes? I get so much for that. No, there have been some great videos that have circulated social media. Like if you look at the architecture from like a few hundred years ago or a few thousand years ago, the architectural, the art of the architecture is like gorgeous. And then you see us like putting up subdivisions, with just drywall. And
Right.
I don't know much about building, but they're not gorgeous and
Yeah,
beautiful.
the beauty of the Tartarian era, the construction and the architecture and the intention of the Tartarian era has, pretty much been lost in the United States. You know,
And
those
buried.
visionaries and buried.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And, what we're really talking about is, the Israelites, for example, they trusted. They had an inner knowing of the potential of a better life, of a life where they were in their own power, where they weren't being overpowered by something else. And they chose to leave what was comfortable, even though they didn't like it, and though it wasn't like even really safe for them, it wasn't pleasant, but they could survive. And they chose to come out of the trust of that, leaving that life and exiting that light and following God, like really following God across the desert was going to give them something new and give them something that was beyond just being in survival, something that would allow them to thrive. And I think we're at the precipice of society right now. We're in that same place where we have to trust to let go when the dominoes start to fall in the financial system and in other realms too. We have to be okay with believing that God has a plan. And I am here to help exalt the earth. And I believe 100%. And I know you believe 100% too, that there is an exalted earth timeline that is here, that is coming into play, that we can strive to reach. If I don't believe that the earth can be exalted, I have no business being here. Right.
Right. I think
So
many of us are here for that reason. Yes.
yeah, and there are ways in the quantum field, the quantum financial system, some people call it. There are quantum timelines that have already been created that if we will just look up from the pothole, walk around the pothole, or maybe look up and decide to take a totally different street or avenue and open our mind to something different, it's already there. It's already being built for us.
It's so profound. I just want to go back to what you said because it just reverberated through my energy field, is that they followed God. Like they were
Yeah.
listening to God inside them. And I think as we talk about these new systems and these new timelines that we can totally tap into if we'll allow ourselves to let go of what we're firmly, otherwise gripping to. The financial system, when currencies have crashed, when they have failed, not just faltered, but
Mhm.
failed, it is precious metals. It's precious
Yeah.
metals that provide that store of value and have helped civilizations bridge into what's next, right? And
Right.
they talk about precious metals. Well, the language, and again, they don't talk about precious metals in our educational systems, I'm sure on
Nope.
purpose, right? If you usurp the language, people can't know what that is, but they call precious metals sound money. It's God's money. So if you're following God, and we know that we need to bridge into some new timelines, into new technologies and things that are going to make life extraordinarily better for so many people, we can, number one, not to cling to it, but we can just look through history that it has been precious metals that has stabilized things and given people a
Right.
bridge to feel safer and more secure as they move into new experiences and new ways of being and living, that they didn't yet know how it was all going to play out, but they had that to stabilize their experience. And I think that's something we should all be paying attention to, or we can look into. It was an education. I can't say I'm the
Yeah.
most well-informed person on all of this, but I can say any of us that can recognize that the old systems are crumbling means that there's an invitation to a new kind of education. And that means being a seeker, being somebody who is
Right.
seeking and looking for where you can feel and see God in the things you're looking into, right? And so, yes, unfortunately, sometimes when we go seeking, we find out about corruption. But the
Right.
flip side of corruption is truth with a capital T, right? And liberation.
Right.
So you
Yeah.
can't find liberation if people want change and they're afraid of change. That's like not wanting the corruption, but you won't seek the liberation, right? It's that keeps you on
Right.
the treadmill.
Right.
That keeps you on the treadmill. And I think we're kind of at a point in time where simply desiring change but not choosing it, we
Yeah.
can't fence it anymore, right?
Right. Yeah. And we are entering into an era that will ask us to be in our full integrity and in full transparency within all our interactions out in the world, within all our relationships, and in all our transactions, with everything we do in life, integrity and transparency.
Hmm. So important. And these are vibrations. They're not just
Yeah.
words. It's like a living energy inside you, in all of us, that wants to activate. And there's something that happens when we transcend the timelines of fear, which is the matrix of control. And it's like the person with the pothole. If we just decide we're not going to fall into the pothole of fear, we're just not going to go down there today. And we're going to walk around it. We're going to know that it's there, but we're going to walk down a different street and have a new experience and meet new people and seeking information. I have found liberation just by new forms of learning and hearing about
Yeah.
precious metals. But also there's something called the QFS, the quantum financial system. Not everybody, again, it's not necessarily in everybody's purview, but it is emerging. People are hearing about digital wallets. The banks that I have used and am using, that's becoming commonplace, hearing about digital wallets, digital banking. It was a big change to go from like writing checks and sending everything to them through the mail to doing online banking. That was a massive shift,
Right. That's
right?
a really great example.
Right? And if you had told somebody 40 or 50 years ago that they were going to do everything from some computer, whatever that is, they were probably thinking at the time, like, how's that going to go? Or even conceiving of a smartphone or an iPhone that you could do all of it in the palm of your hand and digitally transact or send messages instead of by oh, telegrams or something, old-fashioned forms of communication. If you tried to explain this to people decades ago, they would have thought that you were insane. But
Right.
but it was the people that believed it to be possible, or somebody that believed that you could be on a telephone and be communicating with somebody across town or across the world, is the reason that it's here today.
I
Yes.
and I think about how fast over the last even 40 or 50 years, how technology has moved everything forward so quickly. Post-industrial age, how quickly we have evolved. Technology is a tool that can be used as, everything can be an asset or a deficit. And when technology utilized in the right way through people who hold integrity, who hold transparency, and are really looking for the greater good, I think the next 40 or 50 years, we are going to see technologies that are, for instance, from Atlantis, that have never been gone away. They've just been held in this other timeline, returning and coming back to us quite quickly. And if that scares you a little bit, or if you have some doubts about that, again, remember, everything is vibration and frequency. And if the more we self-correct our own internal integrity, our own internal authority, and our own internal truth, the more we adhere to the timelines of other beings, people, organizations who are doing the same thing and creating something for us that is technologically advanced, but also, also connected to the greater good and the helping of the humanity and to restoring this planet, because the technologies are there to fully restore this planet. They are available to us.
Right? Absolutely. In the polarity, or I would say the duality of our world, those poles were much farther apart. But now,
Right.
also, what people and the acceleration that's happening, where if some people are fearing a new technology or the newness just in general, it's
Mhm.
important to remind ourselves that anything that can be used for bad can be used for
Right.
the good of humanity. And it's all coming down to the integrity and the heart and the soul and the light of the being that's
And
creating
what you
that.
want to focus on, like, what are you willing to focus on?
Right?
Are we
Right?
going to focus on the past? Are we going to focus on where we came from? And, the stories of the downfall of humanity, and the story of, just say, the Anunnaki who came down here and enslaved, and the fight between the gods. Everything is a polarity. Everything is Set and Osiris, Enki and Enlil. Everything is a duality. Are we can it continue to perpetuate those old stories of war? Are we going to go into new timelines? Are we going to go into new realities and weave new myths and
Mm,
new stories into the timelines, that of the exalted human? We really do get that choice.
we totally get that choice. And just as you were saying that, like, the big story is the fall from grace. I mean, it's in the Bible, the fall from Eden. But the beautiful thing about that is that we are the weavers, and we get to weave in. If there
Yes.
was this great fall, how about the great rise? That's what you're talking about
The
with the
great
exalted
rise.
human, the
Yes.
great rise. So, and
Yep.
we're in that timeline to really, I would say, that's how I feel it, is a quantum leap in consciousness. And if you're leaping, just think about if you were taking a leap in the air. I remember,
Hmm.
even as a kid playing like that and leaping just with full passion and like, not no fear, right? When you leap, you can't leap and stop. If you're going to leap and make
Yeah.
it, you got to go. You got to go all the way. So part of what we're talking about, if we're talking about releasing the cling, if we're trying to release the things that we grip to that are familiar, there is a spiritual journey in that. But in the past, let me use the analogy of therapy. You can spend a long time in therapy and have very, very slow change, incremental change. Not to say
Right.
that therapy doesn't work, there's beautiful aspects of that for everyone. But I'm talking less about like therapy for spiritual growth and kind of this activation or this expansion that happens when you open your consciousness to what's possible, and we do make these quantum leaps in consciousness. I don't think if it took 26,000 years or millions of years, whatever the history books, there's all different versions of how long we've been here in this 3D matrix. But if it took us 26,000 years at minimum to get to where we are now, we're not going to take 26,000 years to get back. We're going to just
Right.
leap into a new timeline. We're going to like
Yes.
evolve and emancipate ourselves into a new timeline. And so I didn't know if you wanted to just speak a moment to that, of like how you see that evolving or how people can access that inside themselves. And then I wanted to talk about the new timelines a little bit.
So part of my mission here, a big part of my mission, is to help course correct and reverse the spiral of the fall of Atlantis 13,000 years ago. We have gone through that centrifugal center point that happened in 2020 during the grand conjuncture of Saturn and Jupiter on the winter solstice. It was a big news back then. Gosh, it's funny how we forget. But yeah, it was a big event. That was the centrifugal center point date where we began to reverse the spiral of 13,000 years ago. And the good news is it's not going to take 13,000 years to get back to that utopian state. The sweater is unraveling really, really, really fast now, not only in, the collapse and the changing of all these different things we've been talking about, but the collective leap in human consciousness is happening and will continue happening at an accelerated state. It's like the spin, 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 spin. And, many beings, many souls will decide not to jump on that timeline, which is fine. Everybody is here to live out their karma, live out their soul path, have another turn in the soul recycling, come back to the planet, the prison planet, the version of the prison planet that everybody talked, and on that note, we got to stop believing this is a prison planet. We have to let go of that collective story that we are in this planet that is like a prison, and we have to look at being in the exalted earth. We have to believe that before we see that.
Yes.
Because the frequencies between those of us who are able to understand and at least have a big foot over in 5D and those who are still unable to, our realities are completely different. How we see, feel, and move through the world is completely different. So as the humans who are on the ascension timeline, who have chosen that, are opening the doors to their soul and walking through under these other timelines, it's going to start happening. And the other thing that's going to start happening as things start unraveling is people are going to start breaking down and they're going to start kind of freaking out because their reality, or what they perceive of as their reality and their security, is going to start coming undone. So, we have a couple of jobs. One job is to allow by grace those to take their path in the timeline that is their soul has already pre-chosen without judgment. The other is to notice those who are looking for a way through because they recognize something significant is happening, but they don't quite know what to do to step onto this, to help them, to be of service, to say like, well, actually there is another way. There is another avenue. There is another avenue you can turn down. And, if you're interested, I can hold your hand and we can walk through this together and help humanity, those in humanity who are on the fringe of like wanting to step onto the new timeline, but don't exactly know how to do it and need somebody like us who can be like, oh, I got you.
Totally.
This is the
Come
way
this
through.
way. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it can be beautiful. It can be fun. When you turn into it, there's something that, I don't know, it's like we catch a second wind, or we like actually breathe prana instead of just regular
Yeah.
air. Something fills you with a fortification. That's definitely another thing for people to be mindful of. There are like multidimensional coaches that right now,
Yeah.
maybe not for all of humanity, that's relevant in their life path right now. They might think that that's a little bit out there, but for me, I know I want to hang out with multidimensional beings. I want to hang out with
Right.
people who have a broader sight and can see more of the different layers of things playing out. And so you don't have to do it alone. That's what's important. There's communities,
Right.
and more people are magnetizing to the people that they're meant to either work with or get support from or attend classes with or co-create with, right?
Yes.
Powerful. It's so powerful. And I think that's a really good point. People who have in their soul path have chosen to experience these times that way, where there is the
Right.
unraveling of the sweater, where are going to be some what could be jarring changes. If you didn't know they were coming, you didn't see it coming,
Yes.
I don't want this to sound not compassionate. I think it's been a long journey for me, especially as an empath. I don't know how this has been for you, but to trust the sovereignty of every path, every soul
Yeah.
choosing how they want to experience this time. And both of us having lived, you in Atlantis, at Merlantis, and me in Lemuria, and having to lose our beloved, sacred spaces on the earth and all the
Hmm.
technologies, and where they just went into another timeline, but to us they were lost, right? And to come through that and have journeyed, I know I'm somebody who has always been looking for the signs of the portal to go
Yeah.
where a lot of my soul family went when I obviously at soul level chose to stay behind in this cycle that we're coming through now. What I'm ultimately saying is we are trusting the sovereignty of people who are making the choice to not leap timelines, to stay
Yes.
where they are, and they will become the teachers of that timeline, just like we became teachers of the timelines through the centuries when we stayed behind, at least in this realm.
Right.
So some of us are ready to leap forward now, right? And to jump into the timeline of a more galactic and quantum experience where we can travel the realms. It's as normal as breathing. Many of us are already doing that with our intuition and in our dream states and in lots of other ways in meditation. But now I think we can actually do that, whether our consciousness travels the realms or whether we physically are traveling the realms. Our bodies come with us. There's
Yeah.
a lot that's going to open up and be possible, just like I gave that example. If you think about like the telegram before, and now we have these smartphones and iPhones, that kind of leap in consciousness over a period of 100 and some years, we're going to have a similar leap in consciousness, but like condensed into like a decade or two, right? So
Yeah.
it's going to be a quicker, faster leaping process.
Yep. It is going to be an acceleration and a quickening.
That we can't even really conceive. But if
Yes.
you stay in this place of, I think that message from Yeshua or Jesus was to like have basically see through the eyes of a child. We have
Yes.
to open up and get beyond our egos, because the child in us, like the divine soul in us, can see these things and not be afraid, right?
Right.
We can embrace what this is and know that we have everything inside us that we need. We have the divine blueprint inside us. And in fact, if we would relax into our like soul self, the many layers of us through time, we already know how we transcend this time. We already know that we make this leap. I know people will be listening to this podcast at all different states of being and states of awareness. I think I wanted to at least draw attention to the fact if people are feeling this pull forward and they know that they're meant to leap, they're excited about leaping, or they would like some support in their leaping. This is what Ameera is here for. This is what her courses are here for. You can go to her website and you can sign up for some of those. And I know you even do one-on-one coaching. You offer a
Yeah.
variety of support for people. And the same thing for me. And if it's not the two of us, there are other people with these messages. Same thing. Find somebody that you resonate with, make that connection. And that connection can be a quantum leap for you. Like that, just making the connection, reaching out, scheduling an appointment with somebody that you resonate with can be one of your quantum leaps. Also, I just want to bring in here that community is something that's where people have felt so isolated. COVID contributed to that, right? The 6 feet apart and staying in your homes and all of that. That was also by design and put people on different timelines. But it's also a belief system, right? And you don't have to feel alone if you'll put yourself in community as a vibration of like connecting with, knowing that there are other souls that are leaping with you. There are other souls that are bringing in the new Atlantis. There are other souls that are bringing in the new Lemuria. I have to put in my little plug for
Right.
Lemuria.
Yes, sure.
Right? The new Earth. Right?
Atlantis and Lemuria are meant to, coexist and harmonize side by side. It's about the masculine and the feminine energies coming together once again.
Right, exactly. And coming into wholeness. It was in the fall from grace, and then in Atlantis, that's what I think I've always understood is somewhere they they actually did split the divine feminine and divine
Yes.
masculine. And isn't it a
Yes.
perfect time to be weaving those back together again? So the Lemurians and the Atlanteans working together to form this, this harmony. And so if we come back to, we started with like the day to day of what we cling to in terms of the systems and our belief systems and the ways that we contribute to our experience of being trapped or incarcerated here. And if we've hopefully with some language and just put some energy into this, that you can leap out of incarceration anytime you choose. And you can choose different language that doesn't lock you into the incarceration. Words can liberate and words can incarcerate. And if we would just allow our language to leap with us, right?
To
And
evolve. Yes.
to evolve. And that's part of the new myths you're talking about, the new stories, right? We need a new story of humanity. We might need a new story of us, of who we are, right? And all the ways that we might have defined ourselves or the roles we've played in the families we've been in, our family stories, our karmic stories, all of that. What if we wanted to tell a new story of ourselves that we just looked at more the intangible things of like the gifts we are, right? And we started paying attention to that. Some people that we've been listening to, I know you've been listening to it too, Ameera, is like that cosmic human design. There's all kinds of systems like that, but I feel like the cosmic human design, at least is in my consciousness, that it's something that wants to grow forward into the building of these new quantum systems and these new leaps of consciousness. So I know you're here to support like the exalted human and also to anchor in these like exalted timelines. Do you want to talk just a little bit about how you're feeling that as we close this out today? What are you feeling about the timeline?
I design programs, activate your Atlantean light body and DNA, that are specific teachings from Atlantis, from my Atlantean lineage. It's how we healed ourselves, kept ourselves whole and healed in Atlantis, this technique. And through these programs that I've created and in these clearings and healings that I offered and the self-help ideas and tools that I offer people, there's many ways up the mountain. There's not just one way up the mountain. We are all Atlantean, whether you resonate with Atlantean or not, because the Atlanteans came from all over the star system. They came from all corners of the universe. Every being on this planet, I believe, has had an aspect of themselves, at least, in Atlantis. So when we are offered the codes within our DNA that reconnect us to our home planet, our home star system, our celestial families, we begin to reactivate the DNA, the dormant DNA that was within us that remembers when we were exalted. What we need, I think, is memories of like, oh yeah, I remember what that was like. I remember what that felt like. I remember this is possible. And when you recreate the memory, or you bring forward those latent memories of the potential of who we are, who we have been, you can step into with believability of who we can become once again. And I think that's happening for many, many of us. And it doesn't matter what lineage you come through, what process you're going through. If you are actively reactivating and accepting those new DNA codes, and we get all kinds of codes from the sun, and we get codes from these different portals that we go through, and these different, timestamps that happen on the calendar. All these things are happening at a very, very quick rate because we are ready. Our souls are ready, and the more we shed or let go of the old former self, the comfort, and step into what's unknown and maybe a little uncomfortable, with trust and with joy and with that wild wonderness of a child,
Yes.
the quickening that's happening within us will begin to take hold.
That is so, so beautiful and so well, like heart streamed, because I can feel it's it's like a knowing inside you. And
Yeah.
I just want to point that out to people. If you can hang out with people, if you could have coaching with people, if you could be in classes together with people that are knowing it
Community
too.
is important. Community is very important. Many people feel isolated.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who feel like they don't have anybody around them they can talk to or they can come into contact with. And so, maybe going into different, if you see, this video and you want to, connect with me on Facebook or connect with me on Marie on social media or whatever realm, then that's just another person that is in the alignment of the direction you are moving forward.
To me, it's like maybe a quantum crystalline energy, because we have these crystalline frequencies inside us, and it's like we're leapfrogging with ourselves and then connecting
Yeah,
with other people to sort of leapfrog to get together. It's important to know that. It's important to hear messages like that we're not alone. We were never alone. And we can tap into these energies. When you listen to a podcast like this, you can port your frequency in here with
right.
us and gain strength and affirmation and, a sense of resilience and a strength inside you. And I also, when you were talking, I was it was a very big energy when you were talking about Atlantis, and we came from all over the star systems, and
Yeah,
many people, it was a big deal for like therapy, traditional therapy, but a lot of that was by design probably focused on going back, looking back, right? And what I want to say is we're time travelers now. So, yes, everybody has the opportunity to keep looking back, but we also have the templates inside us, the codes inside us that know the
hmm
templates of the future. We have the awareness of all time inside us. That to me is like
right.
the right brain, the divine feminine is that all knowing part of ourselves. And when we can tap into that,
Yeah.
we can access all realms of time, and it makes it friendlier and more exciting and fun and wonderful to access the future timeline that's here to escort you there now, right?
Yeah,
So
we
yeah,
are the living libraries they could not burn or destroy. It is us.
wow, that is huge. We are the living libraries, exactly. We're the house of records, and so it's so powerful because a lot of people just make the assumption, I think, is that the libraries are of records of the past, but it's records of everything,
All time,
all
space,
time.
realities. Yes, we have access to all of it.
Right? We do. We do. So I want to thank you, Ameera, for joining me. I think this is a very important topic. If there are other nuances to this topic, we can always hop on because we're going to be listening to the pulse of what people are going through. And so if there's more things that we feel like we'll be sharing and supporting people about, but no, if you go and you sign up through your website to receive like your newsletters or your messages or Facebook, like you can be in these frequencies as we're sharing our messages. You can subscribe to her YouTube channel. There's lots
Book
of
a
ways,
session.
right? Or book a
You can book a
session,
session.
right? There's lots of ways to connect. And
Yes.
that's what people need to remember and to know. And that we're just going to continue to be messengers of this. We're grateful for people who join us in these podcasts and surf the waves with us. And we'll continue to be messengers. I think it's a big takeaway. People, at the very least, will be listening to themselves in the head and say, well, what do I cling to? I mean, what am I clinging to still?
Right.
Even if it's not a thing, but it's a frequency. What if it's just a thought form, that
Right.
periodically wants to get your attention? So we get to review kind of where we cling and listen for how can we release that? How can we just take a breath and move into another state of consciousness inside us that doesn't have to define us? And then find a podcast, some way to port in to these higher frequencies that is in more alignment with who you really are versus the
Right.
old story of you. We're not our old stories anymore, right? Unless we keep telling them. So the library
Yes.
inside us has the records of the past that it can keep beating that drum. But if we want to leap, everything is inside you. You've got like your space shoes or superhero suit or something. We have that, we can leap forward. And the more we play in that space, the more I think we'll be remembering and it's going to be easier. The age old question that a lot of people ask is, what is my purpose? And
Right.
I think our purpose right now is to be actively participating in bringing in the new timelines and releasing the old ones. And that's a massive purpose for every single one of us. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, well, thank you. Thank you for joining me today. I so appreciate your presence and the gifts you bring and the depth and breadth of knowledge and enthusiasm you have for what this time is. People, if you really hear what we're saying, we're both people that know we've lived through some cataclysms. I mean, we may have passed in that timeline, but we're still here, right? We just reincarnated, and we're bringing in this wisdom. As Terry Cole Whitaker, who I also podcast with, she says, you cannot die. You cannot die. You're an eternal
Yes, we are
sovereign being.
eternal beings. Yes.
So we're here again to bring this enthusiasm. And that's one of the things that I so appreciate about you, Ameera. You just bring this like life force and, this depth and breadth of knowledge that can meet people wherever they are and help them take the leap and walk with them as they do it. So I'm so
Oh, well, hello, Marie.
I know. It's so good. Well, thank you again. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we'll be back.